Bruce Wayne here with another one of my adventure stories. So after about 2 years, my mom she's been saving for many years and planning for many years, and she finally was able to provide some support. So she got together with a number of her sisters and friends, and they hatched a plan to get us out of Rock Hall. Because while Rock Hall didn't seem very dangerous to us, we were certainly falling behind in school. There were real dangers that were there. The people up at Rock Hall, especially the adults, they were getting to a place where I think at some point we might get hurt by one of those adults that were there, just because we were sort of a little bit of unruly kids, etc. And so the plan was to divide the kids up among a series of family members and friends. And so my oldest brother Colin and Michael, who is next in line with me, went to live with a family friend. And then myself, I actually went to live with my aunt Barbara. And later on, I'm not quite sure what happened to my sister at the time. I don't remember. But I remember that Wayne stayed back at Rock Hall for a little bit longer. And part of the reason why I think Wayne stayed behind is because when we were living together with our parents, Wayne had visited Auntie Barbara and her husband, Uncle Clive. And Uncle Clive had slammed the door up against Wayne. And Wayne never liked Uncle Clive after that. And so he didn't want to live with him. So he actually chose to stay in Rock Hall, which he stayed for quite some time afterwards. He eventually came to live with us, but that was for a very short period of time. Anyway, back to the actual event that transpired. So I went to live with my Aunt Barbara, and her husband was Uncle Clive, and their adopted daughter Shakira. And my aunt Barbara was a school teacher. If you remember in one of the stories, I said that my aunt taught me both in the first grade and the third grade. So this was the Aunt Barbara. And so living with her, one of the things that was very helpful was that she was there to correct my grammar and to help me to make up for that lost time of that year and a half of missing school, and that it was clearly a deficit. However, my Uncle Clive on the opposite end, for him, he worked at the bauxite plant in Jamaica. Now, bauxite is one of the chief exports at the time from Jamaica. And so the bauxite plant was located in Mandeville. And Mandeville is several parishes over, essentially several states over. So he would leave on a Monday or late Sunday, I can't remember. But the bottom line is that he was gone all week, and he would come home on the weekend. And when he came home on the weekend, he had this little habit that he would do, which is to beep his horn, beep, beep, when he's a few blocks away from the house. And that was just a way of letting us know that, hey, I'm home and I'm pretty close to home. And so that was sort of the dynamics. However, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I do remember what happened. So let me explain what I mean. I remember the first time that I was disciplined by Uncle Clive, and I use those words actually loosely because it wasn't. Remember, with my father, he would let us stick our hands out and he would just hit us in our hand. But for Uncle Clive, his idea of discipline, it was that he had this very thick belt, and he would beat the living shit out of you. You would have wales on your hand, you would have cut marks on your body. He was a fucking animal. And so the neighbors actually called him Hitler. And the reason why the neighbors call him Hitler, because we asked the neighbor one day, he says, well, why do you call him Hitler? He says, because I can always tell when that guy is home. He says, all you hear is those kids crying and wailing in pain over there. And so he would throw my cousin of Shakira like a tennis ball and hit her before she landed on the ground. He would, I remember stepping over a piece of napkin on the floor. I didn't actually see it, but all I would remember is those big, thick sausage finger hands from working the bauxite plant slap up the back of my head. You see that piece of paper, pick it up. Now, I know a lot of people may have stories like that. Older people says, oh, my parents hit me. But that's not the same thing. This was not like a one-off situation. This was a continuum of week after week of him doing that every time he was home. He was so abusive that I remember being around him, and walking by him one day and forgetting how to walk. And I remember being in the room with him watching TV one day, and there was just something on the TV, I don't even know what it was. And he was just like slap up the back of my head. I was seeing stars. He's like, "What are you looking at?" You know, so that was like, he was a fucking animal. And, you know, and you would just get hit for no reason, and with anything. Because I remember him grabbing a brush and beating the living hell out of me with it as well. You know, so this guy just, you know, I think part of the issue was, you know, as an adult looking back, if I had to guess, would be that, you know, he was living this normal family life. I don't know what the family life was in the dynamics before that. But when we got there, he was resentful of us being there, and he, I guess, just was angry and decided that he wasn't gonna miss out on an opportunity to beat the living shit out of us, which he did, and he did it a lot. And he was a very proper guy, so he would, you know, if you said the wrong, if you said bad grammar, he would correct you sternly about it. You know, he wanted everything to look perfect to the outside world, as if he had it all together. But he didn't. He was just, you know, it's hard to fully explain all the different level of beatings that we got along the way. When you speak of Uncle Clive and my family, people do think of him as Hitler, just like the neighbor said, and that he really was an animal who really abused the living hell out of us constantly. When he was gone for the week, it was just such a joy not having him around. And I remember once he actually came home early and surprised us. He didn't beep his horn, and he went to Shakira, my cousin's school. She was younger than me by maybe about 3 years. And he went by and visited her school and surprised her. And she was just there being a kid, talking with her friends there. But when he saw her doing that, oh my goodness, so the minute she got home, he beat the living hell out of her. And then when we got home from school, he was bragging about how he caught her in school and that she was carrying on, and I bet you she'll never do that again. And Shakira was just terrified of him. So I remember one day when Shakira was just over the fence of the neighbor's house talking to the neighbor, just being a kid, and she heard Uncle Clive's horn, beep, beep, which means he was on his way, and she jumped the fence. And this fence had to be like 4.5, 5 feet tall. It was a pretty tall fence, and she was a little kid, and she had, she jumped the fence, and then and got over there and ran into the bedroom, changed her clothes, pulled the blanket over her head, and pretended like she was sleeping because she was so terrified of him. So that's the sort of interaction that we had with him. However, when Uncle Clive was not around, and before we even go to that point, I remember telling my wife recently that, when she was on vacation, and I said, "Oh, you're going to be home." And I said, I had to remind myself that was a good thing, that she was home, because I remember when Uncle Clive was home from vacation, it was a fucking nightmare, and you were terrified the whole time. You're walking around on eggshell, being scared about whether or not you're going to get hit. And so I remember coming to the United States and we were watching those talk shows and they were talking about abuse. And we were just looking at each other laughing because when we were listening to some of what they were calling abuse, I'm like, you guys don't know what abuse is. I mean, this guy that we live with, Uncle Clive, was an animal who just, you'd have bruises on your body from just the brutalization that he did to us. And, but however, when he was not there, it was just me and Auntie Barbara and Shakira. And one of the things that was really cool about Auntie Barbara was that she was very down to earth. And so she never treated me like I was a child. She treated me like a person. And so when she talked to me, she would talk to me like an individual, and she would listen carefully to what I had to say. And she always wanted to know what my thoughts were about something. And so it gave me a sense of confidence that what I had to say mattered. And over the next 5 years that I lived with her, she helped me, like I said, corrected, the deficits that I had along the way. Because remember, I'd lost 1.5 years of schooling. But the thing that I remember most about her was just her ability to make you feel like an individual. And she was so cool about it that years later, when Wayne finally came to and lived with us, all the kids, Wayne was a very popular kid in school. And so he had a lot of friends, and his friends would come over the house to hang out with us. And they would love coming over. This was the house that all his friends would like to come over and hang out, because my Aunt Barbara, we call her Auntie Barbara, was so laid back and cool about it. So they call her Auntie Barbara too. And one of the things is that I remember Wayne living there, and he had all these friends, and we were really, and Wayne had a dagger that he carried with him, and he was about, almost 16 years old at that point, and he was in really good shape. He was very fit, and of course, Wayne could always fight. And I remember we were all very nervous the entire time that we lived there with Wayne, because we thought sooner or later, him and Uncle Clive were going to get into it, and we were worried that Wayne was going to kill Uncle Clive because because neither one of them were going to back down. And at the time, I remember that beating a child with a fan belt was a thing. Can you believe that? The fan belt from your car. So these little bastards back in the day would think of all different ways to be able to beat a child. And one of them, they got to the point where you use a fan belt. And a fan belt, when it hits you, it instantly would cut your skin. And Uncle Clive got the fan belt, and he decided that he was gonna he was gonna hit Wayne, and he was planning on doing it. I remember him saying, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna take care of him with it." And we were thinking, my Aunt Barbara was telling him, I don't think that's such a good idea. I don't think you want to do that. And in the back of her mind, she was thinking, this is not going to end well, because if Uncle Clive does get the upper hand, Wayne is going to take revenge. He's going to wait till you're sleeping. He's not going to let it go like that. Or he had lots of friends, and he might get his friends to beat the living shit out of Uncle Clive. But Uncle Clive didn't realize that he was living in this world where he thought that he was the only one who really, had the ability to create harm. And so I remember him, one day coming home, when we got home, saying that he hit Wayne a couple of times with the fan belt, and we talked to Wayne later, and he was like, yeah, I took it, but, maybe someday Wayne will tell his story as well, but you can tell when he hit Wayne that it wasn't a lot of hits, and he thought about that maybe this was not a good idea. So I don't think he ever hit Wayne again ever after that. But that time was just a very painful, volatile time in our lives, in my life at least, that I remember. And one of the things I remember from that is just hating bullies, hating people who thought that they had power over you, who could do harm to you. And since that time, I actually literally fought the bully. I'll tell you in the next stories that we'll have. But I fought the bully pretty much most of my life. I stood up for other people. because of that interaction. In fact, I remember that one day, he turned his abuse from us to start to beat on Auntie Barbara. And I remember saying to him, I said, they were talking, and I said, well, you didn't have to hit her. And of course, when he did that, when I said that, he reached over for something that was there, like a figurine. And by the time he turned around, I ran out the door and jumped the fence. And man, I didn't know that guy could move that fast. He threw that thing. He almost could have killed me with that thing, but I jumped the fence onto the other side. And I think at that point, it was such a mess. But by that time, my aunt had moved across the street. And so actually, they told me that I have to go stay across the street with my other aunt for a while, because otherwise Uncle Clive was gonna kill us. So that's what I did, and I did that for maybe a week or two until my brother Colin came down to talk to Uncle Clive, and also my uncle came and had a conversation with Uncle Clive as well about what he was doing to his sister. I'll tell that to you in the next episode, but when we talk more about surviving Hitler. My name is Bruce Wayne, and thanks for watching. Talk to you on the next podcast.